Hey, so I don't know if you messed around with them at all, but swords are really good now. That's all I really wanted to say. Thanks for watching. So swords recently got updated in the 2.8.0 patch, and oh boy, are they fun now. I mean, they were fun before, but for the most part, I feel like they lacked any real identity. You just brought them out and spammed heavy attack until stuff was dead. Now, every feature on a sword has undergone some sort of change, and really allows them to come into their own in my opinion. First up is the light attack. Previously, you could only hit 3 times before your character had to stop. Now, the light attack can be infinitely spammed as long as you have ammo. This enables you to just run into a pack of enemies and know that you aren't going to die to you sitting there because you ended your 3-hit combo. In addition, each light attack can now cleave. Previously, when you did a light attack, you were only able to hit one target. Now, anything caught in the swing will get damaged, allowing you to efficiently cut through a pack of combatants easily. The heavy attack also got changed, but to properly talk about that, first I need to talk about the energy system on swords now. When you have your sword out, your melee icon is replaced with a sword icon. This represents how much sword energy you have, and it regenerates energy based on the sword's charge rate stat. A full icon means you have full energy and can make use of the 2 systems that use energy. The first is the heavy attack. When the meter is full, you can perform your heavy attack, which is normally a massive uppercut, but can change depending on what sword you use. If the energy meter is not full, then the attack will not be as effective. So I highly recommend waiting for that meter to be full until you use the heavy attack so you can maximize damage in PvE. Instead of waiting, you can also just infinitely spam the light attack as well to keep your damage up. It works really well and is fun in my opinion. I'm going to say that a lot during the video, get used to it. I won't apologize. The guard feature also uses the energy meter instead of just draining ammo when guarding. This is awesome because now you don't have to make the choice of using ammo to go on defense or using ammo to attack. You can still perform your light attacks while generating energy in the background as well, and then use that however you want. You cannot regenerate energy when your sword is not out. Okay, now that all the new systems and some of their upsides have been explained, let's talk about the history of swords in the Destiny franchise. I promise there is a reason for this trip down memory lane. Please stick with me for it. Back in Destiny 1, swords were first introduced in the Taken King expansion. There were 3 exotic swords that each had different effects on their heavy attack. There was Boltcaster, which had a range attack that flung a Destructo Disc, a close quarters sword called Darkdrinker that had an attack similar to Wardline Zero's AoE Swath, but without the movement associated with it. And finally, there was Razelighter, which had a massive uppercut attack similar to what basically every single legendary sword in D2 has. These 3 swords were extremely popular because they had such unique attacks to them, and they were also some of the highest damaging weapons in the game. Darkdrinker was the absolute best damage against one of the end bosses in a raid, and most swords could be used for the entire duration of a strike because of their massive ammo reserves. These weapons were truly beloved by the community. Those were the exotics though. Legendary swords, on the other hand, were kind of an afterthought. They could do some light attacks, but the heavy attack didn't have something special tied to it. It was just a slightly heavier hitting light attack. They lacked some of the versatility that the exotic swords had with their heavier attacks. Due to this, you were hard-pressed to actually find people using legendary swords in activities. So, come Destiny 2, swords got changed up a bit. Now legendary swords adopted the uppercut attack from Razelighter, and there were even some new archetypes seen in swords like Quickfang and Crown Splitter, each which had their own unique heavy attack. There were also new perks on them that actually made swords a pretty meta choice in the early days, thanks to things like Whirlwind Blade to increase damage and Assassin's Blade to increase movement speed after a kill. All these were used in either PvE or PvP for some really fun purposes. They definitely weren't the end-all be-all of DPS. Shortly into the life of D2, cluster bomb rocket launchers became the thing to use, and well, that was the end of experimenting with heavy weapons after that. I'll keep the next bit of history short, but swords got a few perk upgrades and damage increases and some various patches. They still never quite caught on though, and I think that was largely due to just how little variety there was in actually using a sword. Most of the time, you were just spamming heavy attack until that big beefy mob was dead. If you had a really well-rolled sword, you could do some fun stuff like guarding and getting a damage boost, but at the end of the day, you were just trying to get as big of a damage bump as possible. These new sword updates are now an entirely new thing for the most part. We've never had sword energy before. We've only been able to infinitely attack with relic swords. We're finally in a place where every sword has its own unique feel with stats like charge rate, guard resistance, efficiency, and endurance. It isn't just about a single perk now, since each sword genuinely feels like swapping between guns of a different archetype or swapping to one with varying stats. Swords are actually in a place where people should really take a closer look at them. It doesn't even take a particularly well-rolled sword either. Just any old sword will have a ton of gameplay variance in it as long as you take the time to start mastering some of the light attack and energy systems. It's genuinely fun to just see a group of enemies and know, oh, I can slice away at these until I feel like they're all dead. You aren't stopped by that 3-attack combo anymore. You can't just mindlessly spam away your heavy attack on a beefy mob doing max damage. I know some people lament that loss, but personally I think it's way more fun to get into a rhythm of doing light attacks while your energy recharges and then perfectly timing that big heavy attack, especially if you have something with like whirlwind on it, so you can just have a massive damage uptime while you charge up that 5 stacks of damage increase. The only real thing I am genuinely sad to see go is Warlock sword skating, and I wouldn't do this video if I didn't mention that. This could be done with basically any relic and had a lunge attack on it, but it was always ready to go with a sword and some ammo. I would spend a good amount of time just perfecting sword skate paths through patrol areas since that was one of the purest forms of fun in the game. Losing that is a really big blow, and I do hope that it can return in some form someday. So I know I probably haven't done a great job convincing people to try out swords, and we're like, I don't know, 7 minutes into this video? I'm not timing it. I know I can't do much for those watching that really only cared about what does the most damage. The new sword system definitely is a net loss in damage. I'm not going to try to mince words there. But while it may lose out on damage, is that really that big of a deal? Like, seriously, think about it. How much damage are people capable of doing now in this game? We used to think that one-facing a boss was crazy. It's par for the course now. Special weapons used to have unique effects tied to their neutral gameplay. Now everything basically has to have some sort of sexy, massive damage boost on it, or else it's discarded because it doesn't keep up with the power creep of the exotic sandbox. So, sure, swords don't do as much damage before, but unless you really paid attention to those numbers, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I can still melt big bosses just by pressing a series of 2 buttons rather than spamming 1. And the great thing about these changes now, I finally have some new things to master in the game, and that isn't seeing how fast I can make a boss's health bar disappear or finish an activity faster. I can master the perfect block and counterattack. I can focus on perfecting the light attack spam into heavy attack for the best damage. I can spec a sword into guard and legit try to become a damage mitigation player for my team. I can delve into some of the roles available on a sword and really find out if there's something new that I just haven't thought of yet. This really is a whole new playing field for people to get into now. There's this scene in Battlestar Galactica that really affected how I view gaming and photography. I'll leave a link to it in the description, but pretty big spoiler warning if you haven't seen the series yet. A character well known for his prowess on the whatever sport it was that they were playing is giving a post-game interview. He's asked if he doesn't win a championship with his team before his career is over, will he consider his career a failure? After trying to give some brief PR-type response, he just sighs and, reveals his true self about why he plays the sport. Look, you want to know the truth? I don't really care about the stats, or the cup, or the trophy, or anything like that. In fact, the game really isn't important to me, not really. What matters to me is the perfect throw, making the perfect catch, the perfect step and block. It's perfection. It's what it's about. It's about those moments when you can feel the perfection of creation, the beauty of physics, the wonder of mathematics, the elation of action and reaction. And that's the type of perfection I want to be connected to. Listening to that little monologue during my formative years really kind of shaped and changed how I approached gaming. I stopped doing PvE content in World of Warcraft because it was just so focused on doing the most damage and perfecting some little parse on a spreadsheet. I started focusing on doing crazy rogue gameplay in PvP, trying to find those perfect moments where I could predict what an enemy player was going to do before they even did it. My Destiny montage series was called Moments of Perfection, not to have some big fat ego, but just to highlight moments where I felt like I was on the cusp of experiencing that elation of action and reaction. So when I hear that people don't care about the sword changes because they heard from someone else that the damage isn't as good, well, that just makes me sad. I think there's so much more to this game than focusing on those perfect god rolls and only using something if it has been determined that it has the highest damage output on a spreadsheet. Try out swords, not for the damage on a boss, but for that feeling of perfectly timing your light attacks to cut down a bunch of enemies and then transitioning into a heavy attack on a beefy target. I hope you found this video helpful. And if by the end of it I've convinced at least one person to pick up a sword after not trying them for a while, I'm going to consider this a success. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.